In the end of season press conference for the St. Louis Blues, general manager Doug Armstrong discussed the goal of improving by 5% every season, with the 100-point threshold being the one to cross next season in 2025-26. The Blues, of course, in 2024-25, this past season, finished with 96 points. So they're really looking to make those improvements every year and return to the playoffs again next season. So with a critical offseason ahead to achieve that goal, what do the Blues and what does Doug Armstrong need to do to accomplish that goal of breaking 100 points and returning to the playoffs next season? What weaknesses do they need to address? Which players need to step it up? And what are the Blues missing? We'll talk about all that and more today on Note News. Welcome into another episode of Note News. We're a St. Louis Blues podcast, and we go live twice a week talking all things Blues. And right now, that's off-season content. So if you want to keep up with that, and with the draft coming up in a couple weeks and free agency soon after that, we're going to be right here to break it all down and speculate on what it means and the implications that all these off-season moves and rumors have for the Blues next season and beyond. So if you want to keep up to date with that and join the conversation, we'd love to have you. So be sure to, if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. It's the best way to help us out. Like this video. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can follow, rate, review wherever you listen. And then we're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at socials. So you can follow us on all those platforms. We'd really appreciate it. Alec, we're here on Father's Day. Thanks to everyone joining us live here on Father's Day. Who do you want to wish a happy Father's Day to today? Maybe in the hockey world.
I think there's a lot of good father-son duos out, in the league. Yeah, obviously the famous Kachucks, St. Louis legends, currently living in St. Louis. At least Keith is, to my knowledge. Um, of course, uh, father Jordan Kyrou and his son, the Minnesota Wild, or the state of Minnesota. And I also will always be partial to Doug Armstrong and his special son Stan Bowman of the Edmonton Oilers GM. So um, it's yeah. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Go call your dads if you haven't yet, and uh, we are here to talk hockey. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah. So at the end of season press conference, I mentioned at the top, Doug Armstrong was pretty explicit. He was talking about that sort of 5% improvement every year. So like when they started their retool, or he said re whatever, right? That was sort of their goal, was to improve a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. 5%, like that seems like a sustainable, you know, improvement path. It's not like super ambitious when you think about it. Like 5% seems really low, but like those improvements count and those improvements matter, right? Like a 100-point team is very different from a 90-point team, even if 90 and 100 aren't that far apart. So like, um, yeah. So like the next step on that track from what they did this past year is that 100-point threshold, the centennial mark, right? And so that's their goal in 2025-26 is to break 100 points, obviously return to the playoffs. And I would think they're looking to maybe get a divisional spot rather than a wild card spot. I mean, obviously you want to finish as great as you can in the standings, but like I think maybe like the third spot in the division or something should be completely like within the realm of possibility, should be reachable for the Blues next season if they're sort of playing at maybe at a decently high level all year. Um, but again, the Central Division is really strong, and so you
Yeah.
know, wild card a wild card Central Division team is still a pretty solid team, I would say. So just to sort of recap and summarize the season that they had this year to sort of lay the foundation for our like improvement discussion. They finished the season with 96 points, a record of 44, 30, and 8. They were fifth in the Central Division, eighth in the Western Conference, and 14th in the league in the NHL. And they finished with the second wild card spot in the West, and everyone sort of um, knows what happened next. Lost in Game 7, so tough way for the season to end for sure. But relative to preseason expectations, it was a big success. So I thought we should start with that, but also maybe a description of their strengths and weaknesses this past season. This is like an exercise we did last summer in one of our really early episodes, talking about what went right and what went wrong for the Blues in the previous season. So we can just maybe do a miniature version of that here. Um, why don't we start with the strengths? Because um, in an episode where we're talking about improvements, I think we're mostly going to be discussing how they would like address their weaknesses. So let's go ahead and start with the strengths here. What do you think was the biggest strength of the Blues in 2024-25 that sort of led to their, I mean, kind of a surprise season?
For sure. That's a good question. I'm not sure I have an answer off the top of my head. I would say probably their what's the word I'm looking for? Like, their fight or their grit or their ability to adapt, I guess, to different game scripts, and dominate and take over in different ways, which is a much more, I feel like, salacious or sort of difficult to define thing. But the way that they could essentially play any kind of team and hang with them, allowed them down the stretch, allowed them to be in more games, which then allowed them to, um, get more wins, have more chances at wins, and then they were able to convert those off of good offense and defense. But I think even going beyond just, like, good offense and defense, I think the structure of play that Jim Montgomery brought in was so gritty and tenacious, that it made them so adaptable to, like I said, all these different types of game scripts, and I think that was what allowed them to go on the run that they did, sort of like I talked about in my breakdown episode. And so I guess I would define that in one word as like adaptability or yeah, I guess their adaptability, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great strength, and that's something that we talked about when we were sort of measuring the Blues up to the conference finalists. Like that's what Florida, for example, is so good at, is winning really any type of hockey game, and on like a and to I guess to like a larger extent, a lot of the sort of dominant teams or like great teams or dynasty teams, whatever you want to use, that's something that they're really good at. Like the Lightning were good at that. The Blackhawks in the 2010s were really good at that. Same with the Kings back then. So like yeah, I think that's a great one to highlight. I'll also sort of throw in there, and I think these all kind of work together. The depth was really good, particularly among the
Mm,
forward group and particularly among the wingers. I thought it definitely took a step this year, so that was really great. And I think that's where it plays into the strength that you just mentioned, but also this next one, just team defense was great. It was sort of top of the league, right? And I
top
think
10.
yeah, I think their depth helped with that. They had solid players, particularly among the forward group. I'll say, again with the defensive strength that they had it coming from the blue line as well. But just solid depth, solid players up and down the lineup that helped them be a great defensive team, a great adaptable team, as you said. Um, and then I think part of that depth is like not just great players playing at different on different lines or on different pairs, but also a great blend of youth and experience, which really helped them out. They had some of that young energy and um, players that were hungry to prove themselves and sort of coming into their own. But they also had those players that had been there before to sort of be the rock, uh, be the guide for those younger players and sort of stabilize the team as well. So I thought that was another a great thing for the Blues. And then the last thing I'll say is just goaltending. I think relative to some of the top teams, like Jordan Bennington is one of the better goalies I think out there. Like Edmonton is doing it with Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard, and I would take Benner over both of those guys. And I think with a lot of the best teams don't have great goaltending. But I mean, a lot of them do. You know, Bobrovsky, Vasilevsky, Hellebuck. Like there are great teams out there with great goaltending. It helps for sure, but it's not necessary to success. But I think that is one of the strengths for the Blues is just having Benner and Hofer in net. Maybe not elite, but solid and reliable pretty consistently.
Yeah, I think on the goaltending, people may not think about it, or at least people may point to it being pretty disappointing. But when they were going on that run, when it really mattered, Benner had a 2.23 goals against and a 9.10 save percentage. He went 13-3-1 since the Four Nations face-off. That's fantastic. And I think the story of Benner is the story of a lot of Blues hockey this season, that they were really good at being very timely. They played a lot of very timely hockey.
Hmm.
Like they hit their best stretch when Colton Parayko went down. Or I guess when Robert Thomas went down, they didn't hit their best stretch, but that was when they could afford to lose some games. In December, when we thought they had to win, they weren't, and we thought that they were cooked, and that was it. But instead, they decided to instead they went on this crazy run to bring themselves back into playoff contention and into the playoff picture. Um, and yeah, Binnington and Hofer are emblematic of this, but they were really the team played a lot of really good and really timely hockey. They turned it on when they need to. I think I point to the last game of the season against Utah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, against Utah. That is also emblematic of that. A must-win game. They dominated. They crushed the Utah then hockey club. Um, so I would say another I think that comes from like you said, that mix of old and new players is having that hockey sense, that mindset of when you need to turn it on. That comes with experience, and that is something that this locker room chemistry was able to bring. So I guess that would be one more thing I'd throw in, is just like the locker room chemistry was really smart and well put together.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, those intangibles were huge for the team this year, for sure. Okay, what about weaknesses? So this is going to inform a lot of what we talk about today in terms of the improvements that they need to make to get to 100 points. But what do you think was, you know, maybe not their biggest weakness, but unless you do have in mind what their biggest weakness is, but where do you want to start the weaknesses discussion with sort of what went wrong for the Blues this year? Um, maybe it was their downfall, maybe not, but like, where are their biggest areas for improvement? Do you think?
Well, the obligatory 6-on-5 hockey play.
Yeah,
Enough said. Let's
yeah,
leave that discussion in the past because it still hurts. Um, I would say special teams is probably the area I'm looking at the most. Their special
hmm
teams, even after Montgomery came in, that had sort of been his calling card. The special teams were really poor, even under Montgomery. And I think it's a personnel thing. But I think having discovered a player like Zach Bolduc to use in the power play really ended up being a very beneficial and worthwhile addition. And having discovered that Cam Fowler can replace the Justin Falk role, and then you probably can have Broberg or someone else quarterback the second power play unit. Having Oscar Sundquist, who just so happens to be a really good penalty killer, or Matthew Joseph. So they kind of figured out some of the pieces, but I still do think personnel wise, there could be an addition there.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's big for sure. Um, I think another thing that I'll say is just offense. Like they could score a lot. Like I think they had a lot of games where
They scored touchdowns.
yeah, where they scored touchdowns or they kind of like broke out and ran up the score. But I think overall, like taking a season wide view of it, I think their offense just didn't really measure up with some of the elite teams in the league. And so I think if they want to get there, they want to become a contender again. I think offense is going to have to be something they address, particularly on the
Like,
high end. Um,
okay, so you not like offensive consistency, or
I guess just like what I'm thinking about is just sort of like it's hard to compare them to say the Oilers, for instance, because the high end is just crazy. Um,
Mhm.
but I think like offensively speaking, looking at their sort of all around production in the offensive zone, whether it's playmaking, whether it's scoring, whether it's chance creation or whatever, um, I think they just don't quite measure up. Like they're beyond Robert Thomas and some of their top players. They just really aren't as like creative as a team offensively as I'd like them to be. I think is maybe my issue. Um, but also, I think that part of the issue when it comes to offense is the blue line, which was going to be another thing that I was going to address. Whereas the team is really defensively sound, I think they're kind of like a net negative when it comes to offense from defensemen. You have players that have some tools in their wheelhouse for sure. Like Colton Parayko's got a great one timer, and there are times when he can skate it all the way up the ice and it pays off. Cam Fowler, solid offensively. Broberg, great skater. Tyler Tucker is starting to figure something out a little bit here and there. But I think overall, the Blues don't really have like a conventional number one defenseman in the same way that like the Avs
Right.
do, or like offensively speaking, that is. I think Pareko is solid enough defensively to be a number one. Like he measures up defensively with some of the best, I think. But offensively speaking, they just sort of lack like a true number one offensive defenseman. As is sort of another issue for
Right.
me. So it's a few different things, but I think whereas they do have a lot of offensive potential, um, I'd like to see a little bit more all around, and I think like most of that comes from playmaking and sort of like chance creation. Um, I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think they almost need like a 1B to Pareko's 1A,
Yeah,
and maybe it's like Cam Fowler could be that, but we just didn't see a full season of him. He ended the year, how many did he put up with the Blues? Cam Fowler ended the year with 36 points in 51 games, so that's like a pretty good pace. I
yeah,
don't think I'll be able to do the math right now, but top of my head, that's probably about 50 points. That's decent. If you could get like a 60-point defenseman, maybe Cam Fowler has that in him. But I kind of feel like probably not. If anything, I could see Cam Fowler taking a step back just because he was so insane, and to expect the same level would be kind of also insane for the same reason. Um, so yeah, like the hope was that Justin Falk could be that, or that Philip Broberg could do that, but um, I don't know. I totally see your point that like creative. I think it is creativity from the defenseman where it's lacking, or like the offensive depth. The way that they play Jim Montgomery hockey does not exactly allow for a lot of offensive infrastructure, because it's a lot of rush chances, and it's a lot of like going the other way quickly, and it relies on the skill of the players, and the Blues just don't have a very skilled team right now. They're a very
yeah,
physical, hard hitting team.
yeah.
So I think it's a stylistic thing that, yeah, to we're not the Florida Panthers that have every single flavor of hockey and are just this dominant all decade type of team.
Yeah,
um, so yeah, I think your point is well made.
yeah, for sure. And just to add some like statistics to sort of, I guess, reinforce what it is I'm trying to say. I think it really is chance creation, shot creation, because you look at like a stat like Corsi percentage, for example. Like when it all shakes out, the Blues aren't great in a stat like that, but they're not bad. And I think they're really boosted by their defense. At least I'm talking about this past season, of course. Um, Looking at like Corsi 4, for instance, which is just their offensive production. Excuse me, they were second lowest in the league, at 53.43. Like same with Fenwick, second lowest. shots for per 60. They were, quick math, sixth lowest. Um, and then something like scoring chances for per 60, like bottom 10, high danger chances for per 60, looks like sixth lowest again. So, like, they just weren't really great at creating quality chances, is the only thing. I think their defensive strength, it like shook out the same way in the end as like a lot of other teams. But I think they could be so much stronger if their offense was just a little bit, um, yeah, more creative, like you were saying, and maybe a little bit more skilled. But that does take time to develop. So, you know, again, it all kind of shook out in the end. But
Hmm.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and then I think another issue, or like, I mean, it's something we've pointed to a lot, is just high end players. They sort of lack enough high end players. Robert Thomas can definitely be that, but it feels like he needs the Blues need like a duo. They need their counterpart to Robert Thomas, maybe someone a little bit better than Robert Thomas, or right around that level. So
Well, that doesn't exist. So
that's fair. That's fair. Did he get a heart vote this
he
year?
got a heart vote. He got one fifth place heart vote.
Shout out Tomer, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Got to
Um,
start somewhere.
I was gonna say, like, on quickly on the duo thing, um, that like we thought at first Thomas and Kyrou could be that. It's just that Kyrou isn't to Thomas's level at all. But now
Yeah,
we kind of see Thomas and Kyrou and Holloway becoming a bit of a duo,
a
which
little
I
bit.
think is an interesting pairing, that could have some like second tier offense that sort of leads the way and maybe even leads the NHL. But yeah, to get someone of Thomas, geez, Thomas's caliber would be ideal.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So let's go ahead and talk now about what they can do to get to 100 points next season. So we've sort of assessed where they're at, how they performed this past season, what they're good at, where they need to improve. Um, so how can they get there? How can they get to 100 points, improve by that 5%? And I think 100 points, safe to say that that'll get you into the playoffs. The question is, how far could you get into the playoffs? How high up the standings could you get? Maybe get some ice advantage at some point in the playoffs, that kind of thing. So why don't we start with some of their in-house stuff with regards to who's already on the team, who's already involved with the team, coaches, players, things like that. And I want to start the conversation with asking you, which players do you think need to step up and in what ways? To me, there's like one pretty obvious one, um, but I'm curious to hear who you think needs to sort of take a step next year, either to progress, maybe like they haven't shown it yet. We need to see a little bit more out of them, or we need someone to get back to what we're used to, like, you know, someone who maybe took a step back and really needs to get back on track. So who jumps to mind when I ask that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably we're right in lockstep on the one that is at the top of the list. That'd be Pavel Buchnevich,
Yep.
who had a good season. Like, don't get me wrong, almost 60 points and 70, like 60-point pace. That's like a good, productive offensive forward.
Sure.
But for Booch, the thing was the goal scoring was way down, and that specifically was something that he's been always pretty good at, putting up 30 goals in his first season in St. Louis, but being a high 20s guy rather than a low 20s guy. There's enough playmaking and creativity on this team that I don't think Buchnevich should be looking to add to that list of playmaking wingers. I think we've got, with guys like Kyrou and Holloway, obviously Thomas, and Jimmy Snuggerud, and eventually Dvorsky when he comes. Like, there's a lot of playmaking. Maybe not like, I don't want to say low skill players. They're not like Robert Thomas though, but
Yeah.
they all have a decent level of, except for Dalibor Dvorsky. I mean, his hockey IQ is just like insane. But um, what this team needs is like a strong finisher, and the thought was Pavel Buchnevich could be that. So if he could return to like still putting up like 60 points, that'd be fine. If
Hmm.
30 of those come on the goal, that was something that Brandon Saad offered to this team that was really valuable that he just kind of stopped doing. Like he just kind of
Yeah,
stopped playing hockey. It
yeah,
was really weird, but his effort just precipitously fell off a cliff. That's a big word. Um, but I think having a finisher and a guy like Jake Neighbors is someone else that can really fit in that role of being a very strong player. I'd almost
hmm
like to see Neighbors like bulk up a bit more. It feels like for a guy who plays such a power forward style game, he doesn't actually have a lot of power. And so if he could like get a little bit stronger and really fit more into that like Chris Kreider role and put up like if Neighbors could hit that 30 goal mark, I think that would be a huge, huge deal. And then my last choices for finishers are two young guys on the team. So I think team finishing is basically what I'm getting at here.
hmm
And Buchnevich was that if he could get back to that. But then I think it's going to come from the young core. Jimmy Snuggerud, Zach Bolduc, and Jake Neighbors. Like I said, Snuggerud is maybe going to take more of that Holloway route and be more of a playmaker like we've been seeing, which would be fine. But man, his shot is so good. He could be really special if he leans more into his goal scoring ability and puts the puck on his stick more. Which it almost is like he was too eager to get rid of it. Normally, it's the other way around that players want to play hero and take the whole game to themselves. It's almost like Snuggerud needs to have that mentality. But I would say him and Zach Bolduc. Bolduc has a really, really special shot. It's just so strong. His release is so strong. He generates so much power. It's almost like it doesn't quite have the quickness, but it has the strength of like a Bedardi release. I don't know why I said it like that. Bedard's release. Um, like that could be a serious, serious weapon. He can be your one timer guy if he gets better hand eye coordination, basically. So I would say if the young core can step up, offer some finishing, and if Pavel Buchnevich can go back to being that sniper that we're used to, then this team can really cook and get to that 100-point threshold for a start.
yeah, for sure. I mean, Pavel Buchnevich finished the season 20 goals, 37 assists, 57 points. Like that's not a bad season. You need players on your team that can do that. The issue is that we've gotten used to him hanging around the 25 to 30 goal threshold for a while. The last time he had 20 goals was when he was still on the Rangers in
And he
2020.
barely hit 20 goals.
Yeah, in 2021 he had 20 goals and 28 assists in 54 games played. He played 76 this year, um, and didn't do a whole lot better. Like after that season, he in 21-22, 30 goals, 46 assists. That was his best year, right? The next season after that, 26 goals. Year after that, 27 goals. So yeah, like we need the point production to return, and we definitely do need some more of those to be coming in the goal, like you know, scoring goals himself. Because like his assist metrics, like 37 is right in line with the past few seasons, and so um, he still looks fine in that regard. But yeah, he definitely needs to be scoring a little bit more. And then yeah, I think looking for some steps forward from especially Zach Bolduc, who was so good this year, and I thought it was interesting that Armstrong called
Finished
him out.
fifth in Calder voting, I think.
I don't think it was fifth. I think it was like seventh or eighth.
Okay, I'll check that.
Um, yeah. I mean, I thought it was interesting that Armstrong called him out by name in the end of season press conference, saying, he had a great year. But
Eighth, yeah.
okay, cool. What he was saying was the point Armstrong was trying to make was just next season the leash will be a little bit shorter, right? There were some mistakes that he made, a little bit of sloppiness, and I think some of that was earlier on in the year, and that sort of came out in the wash the more he saw some consistent playing time. Um, but I think the leash will be shorter. They're not going to let him sort of figure it out as much as they would have if the expectations were lower, not only for him. But for the team as a whole now, he raised his stock a little bit. He looks like a step should be coming. But the Blues also because of their strong season this year, um, because they're hoping, because of their strong season, they're going to be hoping to again break 100 points, and so the expectations are higher for player and team. And so I think with a guy like Bolduc, you need him to take a step forward. Same with Neighbors, who um, I don't think he had a bad year. I think it was just a quieter year than um, you know the season before. Um, because he scored fewer goals, but he had more points total this season, and so I think his game still looks great. But yeah, you like you said, you're looking for a little bit of development from him. Snuggerud, I don't know that you're like needing him to improve a whole lot, but I think just
So good.
having him in St. Louis for longer will definitely help. Having that presence on the team for more than just the end of the season will be big. Um, couple couple other names to sort of add in that discussion. Who needs to step up for the Blues to sort of make those improvements? Um, it's tough and maybe not really fair to say that Colton Parayko needs to be better offensively, um, because he just had like his best offensive season of his career. Um, so I don't think it really falls all on him necessarily, but like we just said, one of their weaknesses is they're sort of lacking a number one offensive defenseman that a lot of these other top teams have, and so you'd like for Pareko to sort of find that, but maybe it's the top four as a whole need to step up. Maybe it's not just on Colton Pareko.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a full season of Cam Fowler. Hopefully, he continues to show that more unlocked version of Cam Fowler. Hopefully, Colton Pareko keeps it up and stays healthy. Um, Philip Broberg takes a step, and Justin Falk isn't, if he's still on the team, um, maybe is returns back to some of his better offensive numbers that we've seen out of him in the past. Probably not with him, but maybe that's what needs to happen. Um, Not a number one defenseman because it's going to be hard to acquire that in any way this off season. But maybe just spreading out that production over like the top two pairs is maybe the answer there.
Yeah, on that, I would actually say that it isn't Pareko. I would say I think, like you said, he had his best offensive season, led the team defenseman in goals, and was eighth on the team in goals at 16. I would take that season from Pareko every time. I think it is the top four, like you said, the
Mm.
rest of the top four. Cam Fowler putting up, if he can get to like 50, if he can get to 60 points, that would be awesome. But I think he probably stays around the 40, 45 point threshold, which you'd like maybe a little bit more. Um, to me, the guy is actually Philip Broberg. I think
Mm.
Broberg had a great season, was such a terrific defender, um, but put up 29 points, which is like not really producing a lot. It felt like there were some games that he would just take over and it would be like one out of every 10 games. If he can have an offensive impact like one out of every, I don't know, 3 games or so, that's a lot more valuable to the team. And if
Mhm.
he could get closer to that like 40-point threshold, you're really starting to do something there. Maybe it's a pairing for him, or maybe it's um, I don't know, some mix and matching of defensive time on ice and such. But I think Fowler's the guy that I look to take a step, because 29 points is really not producing much at all. I mean, that's around the
Mm.
level of Oscar Sundquist. You're getting outproduced by rookie Zach Bolduc, who had a great season again, but didn't get a lot of ice time for Broberg, who's playing so much ice time. Not great. And then yeah, Justin Falk putting up 32 points as an offensive defenseman is like unacceptable. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean Broberg, like, he had a plus 21 on the year, but 29 points. That's just, I feel like that's really telling of his defense is just so insane. But if he can take more of that Colton Parayko path of scoring some goals, or even not scoring some goals, but if he can get to like 40, 45 points, then you're really starting to cook.
I think you're. I think that's definitely fair. It's totally fair to ask for more points out of Philip Broberg in the offensive zone. Be be a bigger presence,
I
create
think
some
that's
more
the thing. His
plays.
transition is so good, but then once he
Well, I was gonna
gets to the
say, yeah,
offensive zone, yeah.
yeah. I think that the point I was gonna make, like in defense of Philip Broberg, I feel like as the biggest Philip Broberg fan in the world, maybe. I I got to stick up for him. But like, I think the thing with Broberg is that like his offensive, because you look at like a model like game score or net rating or something like that some hockey sicko has developed. He rates out really well even offensively in metrics like that. And I think what it is yeah, the transition game. Like he creates offense in like under the radar ways or in ways that don't show up on the stat sheet with like points and assists and things like that. I think he's like maybe like one pass behind an assist or something like that a lot of the time. And while I think you're definitely right in saying 29 points is not enough from a guy like Broberg, who you're playing big minutes. He's playing big minutes and is asked to take on a pretty significant role for the team. Yeah, I think you make a great point there. Um, but I do think he does produce, um, helps the team produce, I think, offensively in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think I'd just like to see him get a little bit more activated in the offensive zone. I think he's just it's like he's too good of a defender that
Yeah.
he often like sacrifices offense to just be in the right place to make the right defensive play.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Philip Broberg, you are too good at hockey.
Come
Take
on,
more
Broberg.
risks.
Come on, man. Yeah. In terms of other players that need to step up, I think you can say, yeah, like goaltending, take a step up because what we got in 2023, 24 was so great. But at the same time, like if they repeat the season they had this year, I think that like that's good enough. That gets it done.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know if I'd say that one. And then just because we might get some comments or something about this guy, like I feel like we should address Jordan Kyrou. Do you think he in any way needs to step up or do more or anything like that next season for the team to break 100 points? I think it's fair to ask him, yeah, score a few more goals or whatever. Um, but like, is he a guy that would be on the short list of players that need to, I don't know, improve or step up again is the term I'll use next season for them to achieve that goal?
With Kyrou, I he's not on the short list for me of guys that need to step up at all. He's very much proven that he's a elite tier two skater. Um, and I don't really think that tier one is probably in the question for him. Then again, he's only like 25, so I could be completely wrong about that. But
Yeah.
or he's 27, sorry, not 25. Um, the last barrier I would like to see him cross is if he could get to that 40 goal mark. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that would really elevate his stock in the eyes of like the league and Blues fans and everything
Hmm.
as like a goal scorer. But I think his playmaking really came along last season, and his pairing with Dylan Holloway, just their chemistry was so good. So with Kyrou, he isn't on the short list. I would say he's like, if you're looking at improving on the margins, if Kyrou can progress just a little bit more, which I think
Hmm.
he might have a little bit more in him, but I think we're close to, if not reaching the zenith of Jordan Kyrou's development. Um,
Yeah.
and that's fine. I think if he repeats the season he had, which was awesome, team leader in goals, team leader in plus minus, if he can repeat the season he just had, I am perfectly happy with that. But if you are looking to get just a little bit better, then Jordan Kyrou can be someone you look at.
Yeah.
But I want to make it clear that the season he had was definitely enough.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I agree. Okay, what about like coaching staff or strategy or game plan or anything like that when it comes to like what can Jim Montgomery do? What can his coaching staff do? And I think this sort of comes back to one of those big weaknesses that we highlighted being special teams. Like where do
Yes.
you see
Special
them?
teams, special teams, special teams.
Yeah, for sure. Like is it as simple as, well, the solution isn't in house. We need to add stronger players that are better special teams contributors, or is there an improvement you think they can make with their overall sort of approach to special teams, or
Yeah,
or strategy in general, like game plan in general?
I think the system they were running, the strategy was actually fine. I think it was the personnel decisions and the usage decisions that it just took them too long to figure out, and they didn't really have a chance to gel over the year. So I do
Okay.
expect it to be better, but it was really, really bad. Um, I think for some reason they just really don't want to have any snipers on the roster. They really want to have them everyone be a playmaker. I think letting a guy like Bolduc or Buchnevich cook more in that role is is what I would look to have a better impact on the power play. I think the
Hmm.
penalty kill will figure itself out. I mean, with the amount of defensive forwards with the roster, I think that was just like it started bad at Bannister and just uh, um, it just took some time to get like get going because they were really good in the playoffs. Actually, their penalty kill was pretty effective against the Winnipeg Jets, except for in like one or two games. So I think the penalty kill I'm less worried about because that's also Montgomery's specialty. But I think the power play, I think their roster or like decisions of who to play on which units, especially like that second power play unit was literally unplayable. It was so bad. And I think that could be a personnel thing. I think that could be a like they don't have a lot of um they don't have the like players the depth skaters to get there because their depth skaters are all like high effort guys like Nathan Walker. Nathan Walker is not a power play player. He does not have the ability to fill any role on the power play, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Oscar Sundquist actually is, but he's like the baseline power play 2 starter, and he just has a weird ability to be good at special teams too. Like their bottom 6 or bottom 9 really does not have the personnel to have 2 good power play units, which is a big problem. And then also just the decisions and the usage and everything, like Justin Falk had such a rough season on the power play. Um, I'd like to see honestly like Philip Broberg step up into more of a quarterback role, and that's like to get more activated in the offensive zone when they have a 5-on-4 advantage. So
Hmm.
I think it's the players on the roster and the way the players on the roster were used were both bad. So it kind of needs like an overhaul. I think the penalty kill will figure itself out because of how good the team defense is. And again, they really came together down the stretch. But yeah, I would be looking at retooling that power play this offseason.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. What about like
Get
general?
Snuggerud in the circle.
Yeah, for sure. I think a full season of Snuggerud on a power play unit would
I
work
kind of
wonders.
like Jimmy Snuggerud, if you can't tell. James
Hmm.
P. Snuggerud.
News to me. Um, General game plan thoughts. Like, I think I'm really intrigued. I mean, because when you talk about like improving by 4 points, that's not a lot. And I think it's easy to think that under a full season of Jim Montgomery, the team they already have could accomplish that. I think that's a dangerous trap to fall into, to just tell yourself that, and go into next season with the same roster and just run it back, if you do want to improve. Um, but I mean, like, there is there's got to be some improvement in the math that you're sort of in the calculus that you're doing to sort of project the performance of this team next season. A full season of Jim Montgomery like isn't nothing. It'll help for sure. Um,
For sure.
and I like
Not having Pavel Buchnevich at center.
yes, yeah, exactly. Things like that, things that could have been avoided or improved upon early season. Um, and again, like I'll point to the end of season press conference, comments from Jim Montgomery. Like he talked about getting out of the gate stronger, getting off to a stronger start, things like
Yes.
that. That would be huge. Starting strong enough to the point where you don't need to go on a 12-game win streak to make the playoffs. Like, it was amazing. It was so fun. It was magical when it was happening. But like, you'd really like to do that, you know, as like the cherry on top of a season where you're already like having playoff aspirations. Like, streaks are so fun. But when it's the reason that you get into the playoffs, I think you're sort of like, okay, next year we would really like to not have to do the streak um, to make the playoffs. So I think getting out to a stronger start is a big part of that. But like, general game plan, I think it'd be really really interesting to see um, how they look under a full season of Jim Montgomery. Just his style of um, defense to offense is really intriguing to me, and like, we saw Colton Parayko sort of come alive and have a little bit more room to roam and skate the puck up under Montgomery's system. And so um, I think that would be really intriguing to see for a full season. But like, are there any tweaks that you think they need to make to that system? Not just full season of this system would be great, but is there any areas for improvement that you that come to mind for you when thinking about where this team can improve, either around the margins or in a big way?
Yeah. One for me that I just personally love watching that I would love to see on this Blues team. So maybe take it with a grain of salt, but I really think that the best defensive structures, and the defense was really good, but I feel like they could go from a top 10 defense to like a top 5 defense here.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's protecting your own blue line, like against zone entries. They
Yes,
played really
yes.
passive on zone entries and were more like chasing to then win battles down behind the net. But I feel like when you watch the best teams play, they all just don't allow you to gain the zone in the first place. Now, that doesn't necessarily create offense the other way. It pretty much just gives the other team another chance, or like resets the neutral zone, resets play in the neutral zone, which is maybe why they don't rely on it as much. So maybe it's like a game feel thing, but even then, like it feels like at least 50% of the time you should be trying to limit chances, and the way you do that is by defending your own blue line much more aggressively, much more actively.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think could really catapult this team from being again like top 10 to like top 5, or even like rivaling LA and Winnipeg and Colorado as like a defensive juggernaut. And that would be really fun if we could get there.
Yeah.
Um, but that's one thing that like personally I love watching when my hockey team, or when a hockey team um, guards their own blue line. It's just like, yeah, of course that makes sense. You just shut down their chance to generate offense. There's no risk. There isn't really much reward. It's like low risk, low reward, or sorry, low reward in terms of offense. Like you can't really
Yeah.
generate offense by doing that unless you like steal the puck. In which case, yeah, just steal the puck every play. That's the best defense ever. But um, in terms of what I like to watch, it is that defending the blue line. And then I guess offensively, they are really, really good on the rush. They're really, really good at creating rush chances.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to see them utilize the cycle more and sort of create like mini rush opportunities. I
Yeah.
think there are teams out there that really do this really well, that can create such like quick hitting offense. Um, that like Montreal is one that I would maybe be looking to, and maybe just like look around the league, see what you can glean from other teams. But I think like if you could create a cycle where the puck starts at the blue line and you essentially pass it in a circle like 2 times, say, if the defense follows it enough, then you get your opening on the other side and you can do like a quick tic-tac-toe like score, or
Mm-hmm.
creating like what I will call mini rush chances to create odd man advantages in the offensive zone, even though it's not technically an odd man advantage. Like finding finding the negative ice, or finding the weak side of the ice,
Yeah.
like breaking your opponent's defensive structure to create like disconnect.
Yeah.
And while it isn't technically an odd man advantage in like smaller isolated boxes or triangles, if you can have more players there, then you can have better chances while set up in the offensive zone. And that's what I would be looking for offensively to match with the defensive part I already talked about.
Yeah. I think that's pretty sound analysis. I agree. I think when you're too dependent on the rush chance, you can get goalied really easily, and it's not always like the it's not always a winning game script. And so I think in the same way that they have an adaptable that strength of adaptability, being able to win a lot of different types of games, I'd like to be able to see them score in a lot of different types of ways, depending on who they're facing. And so you have the Jordan Kyrou, Dylan Holloway connection that's great on a rush chance. And you do have like a Robert Thomas who can sort of do a little bit more like what you're talking about and be an engine for the team and sort of maybe allow them to create a set play. But I think like team wide in the offensive zone, we didn't see them, yeah, like get set up and be able to run plays very often. And so I think that's a great point there and one that I would agree with.
They did, I will say, with one caveat to that, they did down the stretch do that on the power play, and that was when the power play really started to
Sure.
click.
Yeah.
Was when they ran set plays like that. I think it was a Thomas goal, but he said after the game that was like they took that from John Tavares in
Yes.
Toronto,
Yeah.
or like Zach Bolduc, like getting a face-off win, getting it down low, and then getting it to Bolduc in the bumper. That's a set play that they were running to great success. So I think playing around with more like set plays and stuff too could be another way to let Jim Montgomery show his coaching chops and win
Yeah.
another Jack Adams
For sure.
and maybe have the best team ever, but this time in St. Louis.
This time in St. Louis. Yeah. Break that record again. That would be awesome. Okay, so that's sort of in-house changes. What about like external change, like external ads or additions to the team that they already have? In order to get to 100 points, again, you probably don't want them to just run it back with the same team. You're trying to improve, and while you'd like for your young players to work into the team, step up, take on a big role, you kind of do need to add around the fringes or add on the edges or fill out where those developed players you know maybe lack a little bit. And so what roles on the roster and like what holes on the team do you think they need to fill? Like what are the biggest needs for this team? And we've talked about this a little bit already with like our trade targets and free agency episodes, which by the way, if you want to check those out, there's a few recent ones that you should go watch or go listen to. But I mean the 200-foot offensive forward, the thing that the one that Doug Armstrong again pointed out in the end of season press conference as like a goal for the Blues this summer is to get a 200-foot offensive forward. Like I think that's great that he's coming out and saying that, because that I think a second line center is exactly what this team needs. And you know maybe it's a higher end one, but maybe not. Maybe it's someone more like Pia Suter, who is solid. But if it is a higher end one, like a Marco Rossi or John Tavares or I think Granlund and Carlson, I've been seeing those names out there a lot lately too.
Marchand?
Gosh, I don't know about that one.
Yeah. No, he's not coming to St. Louis.
He's not coming to St. Louis after
I'm fine with
2019.
that.
You kidding
Yeah.
me? Um, you know, it, I could see them going after a higher end one. I could see them going after like an under the radar kind of guy, but like that's something that they definitely need. Like that's a hole they need to fill as second line center. That allows Braden Shen to either go back to the wing or take on 3C, which is probably where he belongs as a center. Um, and I would love if it was a higher end one, because like I think if you get a high end center who is at or around the level of Robert Thomas, it really eases the burden on Robert Thomas to be the Blues' best player, because like he is up there with the best players on great teams. Like he is in that level. He can be that guy. But it's got to be tough to ask him to do that alone. Even if you have like that surrounding cast of Kyrou, Holloway, Snuggerud, like asking guys like them to step up, I think that's fair. Um, but if you get another high end guy, you know, they can maybe just play their game without having to think, okay, like I need to be playing at my X percentile all year long to get this team to 100 points. Um, like during the win streak, Robert Thomas was a big part of that. He was playing probably at like the top of his game there. It's really tough to ask him to do that all year long consistently for 82 games. Like there are gonna be cold stretches sometimes that happens. So I think getting another high end guy really eases the burden on the Blues top end players already. But you know, even if it's like a placeholder or sort of a second tier guy, like you were saying, I think that's fine, and that sort of fills that need for the Blues. In the meantime, Dvorsky can be getting ready to maybe be a higher end guy, and so I think that's the obvious hole they need to fill. Do you have any thoughts on that, or want to point to another role that they need to sort of look to fill on the roster?
No, to me, in terms of external additions, that's the only one because I feel like we know pretty much where everyone is in their career as a hockey player at this point. Um, and I think with I don't think anyone on the roster you would point to and say like they could get to Robert Thomas's level. So I think you could get one more offensive forward to Robert Thomas's level. To me, it doesn't even have to be a defensive guy, but that's just what Doug Armstrong himself identified. So hands are kind of tied there. But yeah, I would say that I'm definitely looking for someone like you're saying on Thomas's level. I mean, this is a pipe dream, but my wish is probably Jason Robertson. I think is my number one guy right
Oh yeah,
now because he's on the market, and oh boy, I mean, the line combinations just become absolutely filthy. And I am so in on what he could do for this team as a finisher, as a goal scorer, as a as a point per game plus player. Um, he's my main target right now. I know it doesn't fill that 2C role, but I think he fits everything else, and you could fix. Oh my gosh, you could find someone to fill that need with, maybe a lower tier, like you were saying, a Pia Suter or like a someone to munch minutes while you get Jason Robertson to do his thing. But anyways, um, yeah, when you look at, go ahead,
I was just gonna ask, straight up Kyrou for Robertson, who says no.
the Blues.
What? Really? I think Kyrou is like
Robertson,
exactly what the Stars are looking for. Like
mm,
someone who they know what they're getting. A little bit like I mean a lower ceiling than a guy like Robertson, but he's already signed to a deal. That kind of stuff.
don't get me wrong, Robertson is a better player than Jordan Kyrou,
Yeah.
but I think he's such an important building block of this team core and chemistry as that elite second tier player that um I'm I think it's I don't know. That's why I say that. But yeah. Um but I think I would point to getting a like you said, someone in that like Robert Thomas tier of player on the offense to be either a finisher or another playmaker at center, like a Rossi, or just like some identity. Basically, they could really use some of anything here.
Yeah.
And so I agree that I think it comes on the forward because I think like I said, no one is really at that level right now, or no one is going to be able to transcend to the next level on the roster right now. Whereas for the defense, like we talked about, the defense that needs to get better offensive production, I think you could absolutely have that on the roster right now. If in a Cam Fowler or a Philip Broberg or even maybe a Tyler Tucker, I think absolutely like those players could become better offensive producers. Um, but I don't think you have anyone who's looking to make the next jump to point per game plus outside of like Holloway, Kyrou, and Thomas right now, and you really want one more guy at that level.
For sure. One other one I'll point to is just like the issue of, not the best offense coming from the blue line. Like finding another top four defenseman who can maybe provide some offense would be great, but that's like a little bit more secondary. It sounds like they're more than willing to roll out the same defense and maybe address that problem later. But like if they can do both, that would be fantastic. Finding a young guy who can move the needle forward, especially offensively, would be awesome. But that's another one that I'll sort of point to because I think that is a weakness is lack of offense from the blue line. Um, but I think the main one is that 200-foot offensive forward. Any other like external ads that you think they should consider? Maybe 200-foot offensive forward is the priority. Anything around the fringes, like maybe a Matthew Joseph caliber addition, moves like that you think maybe they could use this summer.
Kind of no, to be honest. Like, I think this roster's really set because I think at that point you're taking up playing time for like Bolduc or other guys. Um, so that's why I'm a little bit more skeptical, I guess, of something like that.
Hmm.
Um, because I think they have a really set roster with a really good mix right now. I don't think messing I want to see Jimmy Snuggerud take the next step. I want
Yeah,
to see Zach Bolduc take the next step. I want to see Dvorsky get 20, 30, 40 games at center or see what you got there. I want to see all these other guys get opportunities that I think if you were to you'd have too many mouths to feed at that point.
hmm.
And I'd rather have the ice time go to the cheap in-house guy than pay like Nikolai Ehlers an 8x8 when instead Dylan Holloway should be getting an 8x8 is basically my point
Yeah,
there.
I think that makes sense for sure. Um, yeah, I like it. I think Blues follow this roadmap. 100 points is in your future, Alec and John.
Because we know you listen.
Yeah, we know. Um, well, awesome. So, I mean, I think 100 points completely within the realm of possibility for this team next year. Um, I think that should be the expectation. It sounds like they've set that for themselves. And based on their performance this year, a couple players take steps, make some key additions, that kind of thing. 100 points, maybe even more, could definitely be within the realm of possibility, especially full season of Jim Montgomery, all that good stuff. So I'm really excited, man. This next season is going to be awesome, and I know the Stanley Cup isn't even the playoffs aren't even over yet. We got a long summer ahead for sure, but I'm already itching to see some Blues hockey again. I think it's going to be a fantastic season. Some playoff hockey again. Looking forward to that. So yeah, should be a fun season next year.
Yeah.
Um, okay, well I think that'll do it for us this time. We're going to continue to provide some off-season content for y'all. Draft is in what, like 2 weeks now. Um, a little under 2 weeks, so we're getting down to it. We're gonna have a special guest on hopefully pretty soon to talk some draft preview, draft content. So if the NHL draft and prospects is interesting to you, then definitely be sure to tune in soon because we're gonna have more than one episode talking about some of that stuff. So we'd love to have you back. And then after that is free agency. So if the Blues make a splash, make a signing, we'll be here to talk about it. But as we approach, we might talk about, we might speculate on some free agents that we think the Blues should target. And then also as we lead up to the draft, we might see some activity on the trade market. So if the Blues make any deals that way, then we'll definitely be here to break all that down and talk about what it means for their future. So we'd love to have you back. Thanks for joining. If you haven't already, we'd appreciate if you would like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's the best way to help us out. Follow, rate, review wherever you listen. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And then follow us at Note News Pod on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We'd really appreciate it. I think that'll do it for us. We'll see you next time. And of course, let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.